All right, guys, here we go. I need all y'all there to let me know if the audio or the video drops out on this in the chat, because when I go to render in Fusion, it's going to eat up every bit of resources my computer can give it. I've tried to tell the computer to keep the live stream at a higher priority than Fusion, but we'll see. So just keep that in mind. If it does drop in, if it does drop out, let me know, and I will make some further adjustments. All right, so here we go. We're jumping right over to Fusion, and this is the sign we're going to be doing today. So let's check it out. I am going to launch a render. If I notice that it's running crappy, we're going to stop the render. All right, so I'm hoping that you guys are seeing this and it's all come through loud and clear. Let me know if it has. What I've done here is pause the render without letting it continue all the way. That's this little slider down here at the bottom. By default, it's going to be set over at excellent or final, depending on your setup. And your computer's just going to sit there and chug on it and iterate this render over and over and over again to make it better and better. So at any time you can either hit the pause icon or just move that slider if you don't need, like a really, really high-end render. So here we go. I am in the render model space right now, and up in your top left corner, you're going to see where it says render. We're going to click on that and go back to model. So this is our model, and basically I'm going to work backwards just for the first bit here so that you can see what we're doing. I've created a background. Oops. I've created a background right here that just represents the wall this is going on. And then each individual piece, you'll see them light up, is its own component. And now we will jump back to a brand new model, or a new design I should say. That's going to be up here in the top left at File, hit New Design, you're good to go. Now we're going to start out getting into this with a sketch. That's this little icon. I keep trying to point at the screen. That's this little icon up here that says Create Sketch. Click that, and you're going to choose which of the three faces you want your sketch to go on. Basically, what plane, X, Y, or Z. And up in the top right of your screen, you can see the orientation you're working with. So I'm going to choose front, which would be this one. Now we'll draw a background with the rectangle tool. By default, you have these three easy to get to tools. Line, which you're not going to use that often, rectangle, and 2-point rectangle. 2-point rectangle, you start at a point and then define your next point. So I'm going to say we're going to make this 8 feet by 20, and that's 80 by 240. And then zoom out till that all comes into view. You have this sketch palette, which is tools over here on the right. I prefer not to use that, so I just close it away like that. Now, the whole purpose of this tutorial is basically going to be, you have an art file, some sort of vector which you can then convert to an SVG. Generally, those are provided to you by your customer, or you made them, and you better be charging them for that design time if you are. We're going to start with that SVG and run it all the way through the rendering process. So now I'm going to import my SVG. That's up in here in Insert. You're going to see Insert SVG. And it makes you click this Select SVG file every time, which is stupid, but here we go. I'm going to start out with the scissors that I used for this one. And these were just sourced from like a vector pack thing that I bought at some point. And there we go. We don't need it that big. So we're using this little curved arrow thing to scale these scissors. So get them basically to where we want. Let's say about that big. Now I'm going to drag to select around the scissors. In Fusion and most other pieces of design software, if you drag from the top or the left towards, if you click and drag from the top left towards the bottom right, what you're going to end up with is a box that only selects objects that are entirely contained in the box. So for example, our rectangle isn't in the box, so it's not going to get selected, but the scissors are. Conversely, if you drag from the bottom or the right, do a click and drag, you're going to get a box that's going to select just about everything that it touches. So in this case, we were touching the rectangle and the scissors, so they all got selected. Just a tidbit of information. So let's get the scissors, and we are going to go to Move or Copy, which also gives us the ability to rotate, and we can't do that yet. Because these scissors are green, in Fusion that means they're a fixed setup. So we're going to select them and go to Fix, Unfix, which it's basically like locking them. And for whatever reason, in Fusion, sometimes you have to do that twice. I think it has to do with it selecting other geometry as well, but whatever, we've got it now. So now we'll go back to select the scissors again, select the scissors again, do a Move Copy, or you can just hit M. And I'm going to be kind of rushing through this one a little bit with y'all, so we're just going to approximately set them up. There we go. And hit Enter. At any time you're going to have a little, anytime you do a modification in Fusion, you're going to have a little text box pop up. By default, the text in there is highlighted, so if you start typing, you'll just replace that. You can also click into it and make adjustments. So now I'm going to use the trim tool, which is just by pressing T on the keyboard. Yep, that overlay, or that keyboard overlay is working. And I'm just going to drag and start trimming stuff. Oops, didn't want to do that yet. Take it back, we're going to go to the line tool. And basically we're just going to close off these scissors so that this becomes one shape instead of a bunch of shapes. And you'll see in Fusion that sometimes you get these double dashed blue lines, and that means that it is taking the line I'm drawing right now and making it parallel to the line that's above it and to the right there. Hey there everybody, Yellow Mug, I see you're around. Timber Scrab, 72 Cliff, anybody else that's there, give me a shout out. I don't actually have, I just have the chat popped out, so I can't even see how many people are here. But here we go. Anyway, we've got these scissors. We're just going to finish all of these off. And one thing you can do with the line tool is after every line, if you hit escape, basically the next line that you draw is going to be a brand new line. There's going to be no linkage between them. So if you adjust one, it won't make any changes to the other. So now we're going to jump to our trim tool. That's hitting T. And basically just draw through all the lines that we don't want in this finished product. And it is going to throw some warnings, but that's okay. Hit, oh, I missed one. Hit enter. And now we have our scissors. So now let's import our text, which I also did as a separate SVG. Where'd it go? Here it is. And by default, it's going to drop them in at the origin a lot of the time. So you can move things around. Actually, I'm going to cut that out and we'll do it again so I can show you. We'll insert our SVG, open the file. If you use this blue arrow on the right, it's only going to scale in that dimension. Likewise, if you use the other one, it's only going to scale in that dimension. But if you grab from the square, you can drag around, and then you can use this little angled piece to scale up and down while keeping your proportions in check. Alright, so we'll hit enter once we've got that position where we want. And let's try and figure out what happened with this D right here. Sometimes it does happen. Fusion doesn't really support SVGs very well, but it's good enough to actually get things done. So again there, I just selected both of them and did a fix unfix to get rid of that construction line stuff. I don't know what happened here, but we're just going to go in and fix this. We'll go to trim, get rid of these pieces of geometry we don't need so that we can redraw them correctly. Oops. There we go. Trim. Normally what I would have done here is jumped back over to Illustrator where I made that SVG file and just output it again. Every once in a while something weird happens, so whatever. So we're going to jump back up to Sketch, go to our line tool, sorry. Where they got it? Yeah. Go to the line tool. No. There you go. I knew I was doing it wrong. Go to the arc tool in this case. And we use a 3-point arc. And that's just to draw back in the geometry of this D that got messed up. And there are a bunch of different ways to do this. But I put a first point connected to the line that's there. Drew a second point. And then your third point helps you define that curve. So again, first point. We'll move this until that little box pops up. And that's like a a snap, so those two lines are connected. Then I'll move that. And again, there's a lot of different ways to do this. I'm taking the quick way for the sake of what we're doing here. And then again, to finish in that D right there, I just used a regular line, which you get by hitting L. So what I'm doing now, every once in a while again in Fusion, you get these weird errors with SVG files where it just doesn't want to import correctly. And the easiest way to, what it's doing right now is it's not recognizing that the inside of this D is a separate shape. And it's also not doing it for the U. And the easiest thing to do there is just select your line tool and draw some lines across. I haven't found a good tool built in. There you go. So we know the problem's in here somewhere. And sometimes doing this, it just fixes it itself. It is something that the Autodesk people have acknowledged as a thing that Fusion has a problem with. Importing SVGs correctly. So eventually, if you get tired of it, there you go. It's right here. What I normally do with a small piece is, there you go, I'll draw a line right to that snap point and that will fix it. So now we're going to open the trim tool back up again with T and get rid of all these lines I just drew. Nope, didn't fix it. Give me a break. Got some, Bill O'Reilly, screw it, we'll do it live going on here. Nope. Alright, so whatever the problem is, it's right here in this little line. So I'm just going to trim out that piece, go back up to 3-point arc, and redraw that little line segment right there and make it match close enough. If you guys are not following with what I'm doing, please let me know and I will take a moment to answer any questions about it. Because I am moving a little bit quick through this one just so that this doesn't end up being like a 2-hour event. Because this really is not the important part of what we're doing. Okay, there we go. So now that's its own separate shape. And the same thing is happening with the U. And I bet I can already see what it is. Yep. So it's got this weird little zigzag in here for some reason. Oh, that wasn't it. Alright, let's very quickly deal with this. Okay, so it's somewhere in here. Alright, so I'm just going to redraw this whole segment as well with the arc tool. Again, if I was doing this for a customer, generally I would just go back into Illustrator and fix this file, but I do not have this live stream set up to do that. It would mess everything with all this on-screen keyboard stuff up. So, we're going to do it that way. We fix the U. There we go. Oh, give me a break. Really? The D's are broken too. Alright. So I hope this isn't confusing y'all. I'm just using kind of a what do I want to call it? Just showing you the reality of it is when you're trying to do something real quick, sometimes you do use dirty little tricks like this because in the final product, you're not actually going to be able to see that that happened. Now, if this was something that needed to be super dimensionally accurate, I would never do this. But it doesn't because we're just doing this render for the sake of a customer being able to see the product, the project. So what I've done now is I've done a Control-C, which is just copy, and then when you Control-V in Fusion, it brings it up just like a move request. I've duplicated that D that I just fixed over here, lined it all up, and then what I'm going to do is move it up 24 inches, hit enter, just so I know where it is. I'm going to delete this one, grab this one, hit M to move. I'm going to move it back down 24 inches. Sorry, negative 24. Boom. Alright, so we should be good to go now. Everything is its own piece inside of the scissors. Okay, so now we basically have our simple sketch here. We're going to model this one up on runners too, just because that's how the final project ended up going. So I'm going to hit R for rectangle. I'm going to start right down the center. And I'm going to draw my rectangle all the way across. Now, to the left, you'll see two text boxes, one with the highlighted 0.401 inch, and the other one saying 118 inches and some change. I'm going to change my runner to a 1-inch runner, and the length I'm going to leave alone with what I've drawn, so I hit enter. And there we go, we've got a runner. Actually, for the time being, I'm going to remove the runner. We don't need that. So, this sign was done with channel letters in the finished product, which means that we need to model in a small perimeter piece that looks, we need to model in this piece so that we can then model in the light that's going to go on the inside. So the best way to do that is jump back over to our tool, or to our sketch, sorry. We're going to hit, you can go to sketch, come all the way down here to offset, or you can just hit O on your keyboard. And what you want to do is select an outline, and we're going to drag inward. You got to make sure you're going in, and then note the positive or negative of the value here. We have a negative, so I'm going to do negative 0.05, which is about 18 gauge metal. And we're just going to run around the tool, or run around the job and do that for everything. Negative 0.05. And I'm just hitting O to bring up the offset tool again. Nope. And every time you do your offset, it is going to treat it differently. So in this case, it's negative towards the inside, but that last time I just did it, it went negative towards the outside. Now with your letters, you can actually do, it's going to be easier to do them one at a time. It's just faster at the end of the day to get it just right. There you go. So this is 0.05. And you hit O before you select the outsides on each one. This is negative 0.05 this time. There you go, 0.05. If you don't hit O before each one, what you'll do is you'll select just one segment of the line, then you'll hit O, and you'll only be offsetting that segment. Instead of, if you hit O first, or select offset first, it's going to look for a completable shape. This is 0.05. So we've got, that's the first one done. And this is where you just kind of get into a routine. I actually normally would have a hotkey set up to do this, but I'm not going to try and get into that at this point. Alright, so something's wrong with this O, with the dot, sorry, with the dot of the I here. So I am just going to draw a new one. Again, normally I would go fix that. There we go, 0.05. Sorry, negative 0.05. So are you guys planning or just wanting to use this to actually help drive sales, which is what I do, or just for fun and learning? Let me know if you have, you know, a plan to actually use this information. If not, you know, this is how I learn. Most of what I learn is just by watching other people do it. So now we're looking at our sketch, and we're going to go and actually start producing a three-dimensional shape now. Go to Q, which is going to bring up our extrude function. Let me do it now. In order to stop all that camera movement, once you've completed your drawing, at least the start of it, you go to Stop Sketch up here. And that's going to return you back to this ISO view. Fusion added that with a recent update, and I'm not a fan of it at all. Come on. So when you want to move around the screen, you can hit and hold the center or scroll wheel button on your mouse, and that will let you move. You can also do shift scroll wheel, and that brings you up like a pan orbit function, or control scroll wheel, which lets you pan around but in a slightly different way than not using control. I don't know how to describe it, but really you're just going to use shift and the other one. So what we're going to do is zoom in real tight here and then go to Sketch. Where they put it. Extrude. Oh, sorry, it's in Create, not Sketch. You're going to go to Create, Extrude, or you can just hit Q. And I don't know why it's Q. But now we're just going to select all of these little shapes that we've created with these offsets. We've got basically the space between our original line and that offset towards the inside. What is wrong with this? Alright, we'll come back and fix that one. Thank you very much, Stu. Antonio, good to see you, man. I actually dropped a package in the mail for you today. Alright, so we're just going to proceed around. And you're not hitting shift or anything, shift or control or anything to do these multiple selections. When you have the extrude window open, it's going to let you keep selecting surfaces. Maybe we should have picked a sign that just had 1 or 2 letters on it. But as we work our way around, there we go. We've got all of these, I think. Yep, we've got them all except for that D that I need to fix. So now we have we're going to do an extrude, but we also have offsets, and that's basically in Fusion, and this is the big jump between something like SketchUp and something like Fusion, is in SketchUp you start out in kind of 3D space. In Fusion, you're basically laying everything out in 2D and then growing parts off of that plane you've laid out. And then you can go lay out another plane, lay out somewhere else, whatever you need to do. You can change the angles of those, but everything starts in 2D, just like a set of blueprints. So what we have right now is a sketch. It's all in 2D. And that sketch is eventually going to be our wall that this sign is mounted to. So in order to have that light shine out, we want to offset off the wall a little bit. I'm going to choose 2.5 inches. So over here in profile plane, inside the extrude menu, we instead change that to offset plane. Now we get an offset. We're going to jump forward 2.5 inches. And then we have to choose how big we want this piece or how thick we want this piece to be. I'm going to use 1 inch. And then this is the really important one. Don't use new body. You want to go to new component so that you can individually separate all these parts out. Not if you use new body, it's just one model that everything gets thrown into. So we go into new component, hit OK. And you're going to see over here on the right that once that processes, we get that component. So let's immediately go rename that to letter bodies. And you'll see why it's the whole body here in a second. But now I'm going to open up my sketches, make this sketch visible again, go back inside of it and figure out what was wrong with this D. Why this offset wasn't working. So I'm just going to delete the offset, hit offset again. Come on, what is wrong with this? Every so often, like I said, I actually talked to the Autodesk people at FabTech, just kind of having some fun with them, saying like, hey, thanks for Fusion, I used the hell out of it. And then we got to, they were like, oh, what do you use it for? And I was describing what I do. And, you know, we got to talking. They were like, well, what features do you want to see added? Anything else? And I told them, I was like, nah, I'd just really love to see you guys have better SVG and STL support. STLs are the files you're going to see most often for 3D printing. It's I think it stands for stereolithography or something like that. Okay. I think that's where the problem was. It was indeed. And there are other ways to find problems in your geometry. This is just the fastest way to do it in my book. But this gives us a good thing we can do here. I'm now going to stop that sketch again by clicking Stop Sketch. And I'm going to use Shift and the scroll wheel to move around. Now what you can see is down here in the very bottom, we have our timeline. And the timeline is basically a history of everything you've done, and you can go back in and edit previous steps. This is one of the things that's like revolutionary about Fusion. Is I'm going to go in here and double click on this extrusion operation, go to profile, which I'm already selected, and I'm going to click this little gap just like we did before, and now that piece is, you know, just like everything else, as if we'd done it, as if we didn't have that error the first time around. So I'm going to turn the sketches off just to make sure it looks good. It does. Let's turn the sketch back on. Now I'm going to hide the letter bodies we just made. And we're going to go back and do another extrusion. If at any point your screen gets screwed up like this, you can use this little cube up here in the top right, click on it, and that'll square everything up. Stu, my wife says, you drink fancy beer. If we're spending $6 on a beer, but thank you. All right, so now we've selected all our geometry. And we're going to clear out the centers of the letters. A little fun fact, the centers of letters, the inside of an O, the inside of a upper or lowercase a, etc., are called counters. And that comes from counterpunching, when people used to have to actually punch steel to make the letters to then use in a letterpress. So, I wish that name was something a little bit better or a little bit more obscure, because that would make it easier to explain to customers. But here we go. We've now got all the letters selected and nothing that we don't want. So, again, we're going to go to Q. Oh, we already are. We're going to change from a profile plane to an offset plane. We're going to use our offset of 2.5 from before, but then we'll add 1 because that's how thick we made that channel section. And that's going to be our offset of 3.5. And then our distance, or our thickness, I'm just going to use 0.1. If I was really caring, I would, use 0.067 or whatever 14 gauge steel is, or whatever gauge I'm going to use. But now, before we hit OK, I'm going to go back over here on the left and use this little light bulb to make visible again the extrusions or the channel sections we just made. And you'll see over here in extrude, that operation went from saying new body to now join as an operation, because I can connect these faces we're making to those extrusions we made in the last one, or in the last section. I'm going to turn off the sketch and then zoom in, and you can kind of see what we've created. Let's orbit to the back of it. And there it is. It's basically just a three-dimensional object. And in my most recent project, which is about to go live on YouTube, this is exactly how I made the 3D model for this thing. This was a failed print just because it was sloppy. But at this point, I would have selected one of those letters, exported it as an STL, and sent it to the 3D printer. But we're going to keep moving. So, we'll turn our sketch back on, and we're going to hide our letters again. So now we jump back in, and this one goes real quick. Again, we're going to go to extrude, select the inner faces of each letter. So if we zoom in, you'll see we're grabbing everything except for that channel piece. Just work down the line. There we go. And again, we're going to move to offset plane. This time, I'm going to do my offset as, just like before, 3.5. But for my distance, I'm going to do negative, let's do 0.25. And so I'm creating these little slivers. Now again, we go to new component because we don't want this to be part of the letter. And hit OK. Immediately, let's go name that component. This is going to be our LED light source. In the way I do my signs, this would be LED strips, but for Fusion's purposes, it doesn't matter that they're not strip shaped. And now, as we turn back on the letters from before, we can see these LED components. They're inside of the letter. I'm hoping that's showing up clearly enough. You can see it right there. From the outside, they wouldn't be visible, but when we select them, you can see where they are kind of inside. Oh, come on. Thank you, Stu. Damn it. How long did I do for that? Alright, so. Somebody tell me, did you guys see me making these LED light strips, or did I have that whole section messed up? Let me know and I'll go back and do it. All right. So. All right, we're just going to go back and do it. I'm going to delete this whole LED light source section component. All right. So, here we go. We've got our letter bodies right now that we've just finished making. I am going to turn them off. And then we're going to jump into our sketch and zoom in. We're now creating the oh gosh. When you go to extrude, they just changed this camera jump and it annoys the heck out of me. We're going to be creating the piece that is our LEDs. We go to Q for extrude, and we're just going to select the inside of each letter. Basically, we're selecting the opposite of what we did when we did the channel section. We're only selecting the inside, not the channel part. You're cool, Stu. All right, so now we're going to go again to offset plane. And previously, the offset for the faces of our letters was 3.5 inches. The total offset, I should say. And so we're going to use 3.5, but for the distance this time, instead of coming forward, we're going to use a negative number. In this case, negative 2.5. And you'll see we're creating these little wafer-looking things. So, instead of new body, again, we want to go to new component and hit OK. We're immediately going to get a component over here. It's just called component 3. Let's rename that to LED light source. And now when we turn back on, or make visible again, our letter bodies, you can see that these LED light sources are like little wafers inside of the shape. If you deselect them, all right, turn the sketch off so we can do this. Go away. There we go. So we just see solid letters, but if we highlight over these, you can see they're kind of inside of the letter. And that's exactly what we want. We're later going to set these to be a light source, and that will give us our light. So for the sake of brevity on this, we're not going to model in the runners. We're going to move right into setting up appearances. In Fusion, you just hit A. It's going to bring up your appearance window. And we've got, oh, sorry, I take it back. We do need to do one more thing. We need to make the wall that this is going to show up on. So select your whole sketch, hit Q, grab everything. Come on, computer. Starting to bog down. All right. And we're just going to extrude this out -1 inch, we'll call it, so it goes away from us. And again, new component. We're going to name that component wall. All right, now we are ready. So these little light bulbs turn the visibility of things on and off. And that's what we've got. So let's go into A. That's going to bring up our appearance window. Now, if you've never done this before, you're not going to have any textures or materials downloaded. Every one you go to, let's use one I never have. Let's say leather and cloth, open. So if I wanted to use generic fabric, you'll see this little download arrow. You have to click that. It does it in just like a second. There you go. I've downloaded it. So now I can use it. If your Fusion is not up to date, up in your top corner, there'll be something that's saying like, hey, you're out of date. But your downloads just won't work. And it doesn't actually say like, hey, this is what's wrong. But anyway. So let's use powder coating, which is, you can use paint, you can use whatever you want to. But I like to use powder coating rough because it actually gives it a nice texture in these finished pieces. We grab that. I'm going to make these ones black. We're going to drag that to letter bodies and just put it on everything. If you individually, if I wanted to use blue, I could individually drop them on each letter like this. But if I just drag over to the component in your component list or browser on the left, you can drop everything. And because I'm replacing something, it's going to say, do you want to remove the old appearances? Yeah. All right, let's go back to black. There we go. Now this is the big one for lighting, and this is really the thing that just helps sell jobs. Let's type in LED, You're going to see a whole bunch of LEDs show up. Unless you need a tinted one, just use the 8 lumen white LED. Again, drag that over onto your light source. And now we need something for the wall. Let's use, I don't know, brick. Oh, it doesn't have brick. There's a surprisingly few number of textures that are in some of this. So let's just use wood, solid. What do we got? Come on. Finished. There are some awesome wood textures. If you're trying to make like an idea. Okay, we'll just use 3D stained pine. Let's drag that over here. There we go. All right. Come on, there should be brick. There it is. It's in stone. Oh, those are garbage too. What does red granite look like? Looks terrible. What about blue pearl? That looks terrible. They all look terrible. Going back to wood. I did find one texture in here somewhere that kind of looks like brick, but it's not called brick. I think it's called carbon fiber for some reason. Anyway, so we're now going to... We've pretty much finished laying everything out here. So we're going to use, up in the very top left corner, we're going to go from model to render. And that's going to bring us up, you know, a basic setup. And I have mine set to kind of be twilight time, but you can set it up a bunch of different ways. Again, you can bring up your appearance menu here. You can use the little lamp to set up your scene. And over the second option is environment library. And again, I think you have to download each one of these individually when you first do them. If I'm doing something that's going to go outside, I generally use this Crossroads environment. And then in the settings side of this same window, you do have to change your background to environment. There's lots of little quirks you got to play with. But here you go. You'll end up with, you know, this sort of thing. And if I'm doing like a neighborhood entryway sign, I'll kind of line this up right there or something like that. Just doesn't really matter, but people want to see something. So let's put it right there. And then you have this brightness slider up here at the top that you can kind of choose what time of day it's going to be. And you can play with the sliders just to get kind of a basic idea where you are. You can change the focal length of your camera. You can change all sorts of stuff here. Now we've got that set to, let's say I want to be right about there. So we're good, and we're going to do a test render. And again, if the whole stream bogs down, I'll be right back. To do that test render, you just hit the play icon. Okay, so I stopped that render because I actually liked the way it was going. The lighting seemed to be just about right. I think I've adjusted my I've adjusted the values on my LED texture, and I believe I saved those as my default. So you may have to do the same for you. I'll show you how to do that very briefly. You go over to Appearance, and in this second little category, you're going to see things that are in the project. And that's basically anything you've used. So you'll find the texture for your LEDs, double click on them, and you get this big window here. Luminance is the big one that's going to change how bright your LEDs are. Roughness and reflectance don't do much, but you can play with them. If you go to advanced, this is really where you can get into all sorts of stuff. Change the emissivity. You can change the color. You can whatever you need to do to make them look the way your experience tells you they're going to look. So we'll close that appearance window. Go away. Yeah, we want to get everything lined up because once you start a render, you can't change anything. So get everything more or less lined up where you want to go. I don't know why I'm using this one. Let's go over We're just going to use it anyway. So let's just say we're going to go right there. Frame everything. Like I said, once you tweak it, or once you start the render, you can't tweak anything without starting over. So there we go. I'm going to start this render again. And there we go. Now you can see there's a whole lot of specks of light, and that's unfortunate because, you know, it doesn't look great. And that's what this little slider down here at the bottom is. When I really want to put out a nice one, I set that all the way to final, and I mean, I walk away. I have about a $3,000 desktop that I built myself, 64 gigs of RAM, you know, 11 gig, 1080 Ti graphics card, the whole 9 yards, and it's still like 10 minutes for my computer to do one of these final renders. So just be prepared that it's going to take some time to really get them nice. But you can see every iteration it does, it's going to be just a little bit better. The reflections are going to be a little bit nicer, and on and on and on. I'm going to let this guy run out just a little bit. We'll pause it right down here, hopefully, so that, you know, the stream will work a little bit better. And see, there you go. I zoomed, and so the render starts over. You can't move anything when your render's running. But there we go, guys. You have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, I'll show you. Lastly, once you have finished a render, you would go up here to your capture image and just save that out to wherever you wanted to on your computer. It's also going to save those to your Fusion profile, which is available online if you have Fusion on another computer, like I have it on my computer at the shop. You know, as soon as you save something here, it's available over there. It's all up in the cloud. There's a lot you can play with in here. You can get into like texture mapping, which will let you just tweak the way reflections work. It'll tweak the way light bounces around. It'll tweak the way it's, for the most part, you don't need to, but you can get in there if you really want to make something look right. And then decals are going to be kind of more the same. So if you guys joined late or you want to, I am going to be repeating this same exercise this coming Sunday at 5 o'clock Central. So what's that? 3 in the afternoon Pacific, 6 Eastern. And we're going to be doing a different sign with some real different options on it. Not a channel letter sign. It's going to be a flat panel sign with light projecting up from below, behind, and in front of the sign to kind of give it two kinds of backlight. So if you guys want to see it again, Sunday, I am going to leave this video public for a while, and I thank y'all for stopping by. If there's not any questions in the chat, I'm going to call this one a day. I'll switch you back over to the computer screen. So, we are on the computer screen, so that you can just take a look at it, and I am going to let the render run for about 2 minutes while I see if there's any questions, and otherwise, I will see y'all in the next one. Thanks. Let's go get a drink. There you go. It's really starting to clear up. Generally around iteration 30 to 40, which there's an iteration counter in the bottom right corner, right here. Around 30 to 40 is where they start to get real clean. One of the biggest problems with lights, and you can still see it right now on the points of the scissors, is the light will leak through other parts of the model. And I don't know what causes that, because I would think it would be exactly the opposite, that not enough light would get through things. But for whatever reason, excuse me, it does. It leaks through there. And as you do these iterations, it's basically plugging all those holes and making the model more solid. So it just ends up cleaner. The final product, I generally let them run out to excellent, which is normally somewhere around 150 revisions. Takes about 5 or 6 minutes on my computer. And that's generally good enough. If I have done some that are like modeled up in stainless steel with lights, and with all those reflections, because stainless steel is shiny, the renders take a long time. I did one that took about 45 minutes, and the final product looked awesome, but like the 5-minute into it one looked like garbage. So we let it run out for the whole however long it was. And hopefully you guys can actually see the differences as this renders out. You get some reflections in the light. It does a pretty good job of managing the intensity of the light too, which is a big one that people complain about. When you send them kind of a low quality render, you really just, the light isn't accurate. And if you look at, for example, the thumbnail of this live stream, you'll see that like the middle piece of art is the render that I sent. The bottom one is a picture of the actual finished sign. Granted, it's from a cell phone, so it's not a wonderful picture, but the intensity of the light is pretty much exactly the same. And part of that's just experience, because I know what a sign's gonna look like. So when I do the render, I can kind of match the light to what it should be. But part of it too is just spending the time to get your, get everything lined up. Hey, Daryl, don't think it's over your head, man. I've had quite a bit of experience with SketchUp, but I went from having literally never used Fusion to using sorry, I'm pulling up a link for y'all. I went from having literally never used Fusion to doing renders for customers in just a couple minutes. I am going to paste a link into the chat here. A buddy of mine, his name's Doug at DN Handcrafted, did a series, or is in the process of doing a series. He doesn't put out a lot of videos about rendering in Fusion, and his is obviously a little bit slower. You can stop and rewind, but it's high quality work with a lot of good editing. The other side of it too is, y'all let me know if this on-screen keyboard and mouse helped. I figured it would, so I kind of rearranged everything for it. If it wasn't necessary, I'll cut it out for Sunday. But it is kind of it's amazing what you can do with computers nowadays. Super cool. So, like I said, guys, I'm going to wrap it up. And if you guys want a little bit more, Sunday, 5 p.m. Central, we're going to do it again with a whole different sign. And if you guys have other topics, hit me with them. I'd love to hear them. And if it's something that I feel like I know enough about to teach, I will consider turning it into a live stream or a class. Till then, y'all, thanks.